The morning sun cast a pale light over the bustling city streets as Evelyn Carter boarded the Route 23 bus. She moved quietly, her demeanor calm, her presence unobtrusive. A day like any other. Until it wasn't. Within moments, Evelyn found herself at the center of a storm that would spark outrage and inspire action far beyond the bus's grimy windows. Evelyn had chosen a seat near the front, settling into her usual routine, but the driver, Robert Whitman, saw her presence as an affront. His voice boomed through the bus like a gavel striking judgment. "Ma'am, you're in the wrong seat. Move to the back." His tone carried not the weight of rules, but of something far ugly. Evelyn met his gaze, her expression serene but unyielding. "This seat suits me just fine," she said evenly, her voice steady despite the rising tension. Around her, passengers exchanged nervous glances. Whitman, unaccustomed to defiance, slammed his hand onto the steering wheel. "If you don't move, this bus isn't going anywhere." The air thickened with unease. A teenage girl whispered to her friend, "She's not doing anything wrong." A young man began filming on his phone, angling it toward Evelyn and the irate driver. Whitman's patience snapped. "Turn that thing off. You're just as disruptive as she is." The young man smirked, his defiance quiet but sharp. "Disruptive? No, I'm documenting. There's a difference." As the minutes dragged on, passengers began to find their voices. A middle-aged woman clutched her worn leather bag tightly and said, "He's treating her like garbage for no reason." Whitman turned on her, his fury spilling over. "Lady, you don't know what you're talking about. I've been driving this route for years. I know how to handle troublemakers." "Troublemaker?" the teenage girl shot back, standing. "She's sitting there. That's it." The argument simmered, passengers murmuring in quiet support of Evelyn, who remained seated, her resolve unwavering. Outside, a growing crowd of onlookers began to gather, chanting, "Let her sit," and waving hastily made signs. A reporter's camera captured the scene as tension mounted. Whitman's frustration boiled over. He grabbed his radio, barking at dispatch for reinforcements. "We need more officers. The crowd's getting out of control." The officers arrived, but hesitated to escalate. One stepped onto the bus, his face tight with frustration. "Driver, we need to de-escalate. The crowd is growing and the media's here." But Whitman was past reasoning. His anger turned physical as he yanked Evelyn from her seat. The bus erupted in outrage. Passengers shouted, some standing to intervene. Cameras captured every moment. "Let her go!" yelled the young man with the phone, stepping forward. Whitman shoved him back, doubling down on his aggression. Evelyn, though in pain, refused to cry out. "This is assault," she said firmly. "You're not above the law." The officers intervened, forcing Whitman to release her. One officer, his voice sharp, arrested Whitman on the spot. "You're under arrest for assault. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." The passengers erupted into applause as Whitman was led off the bus, his protests drowned out by the crowd outside. Evelyn's calm demeanor never faltered, even as she rubbed the arm Whitman had grabbed. The young man with the phone turned to her, his tone softer. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Evelyn nodded. "It'll take more than that to shake me," she said quietly. The replacement driver arrived, a petite woman with kind eyes. "Where to next?" she asked with a respectful smile. "We discussed coming up with something kind," Evelyn replied simply. "Forward to removing my suit." The incident exploded on social media. The young man's video went viral, capturing millions of views within hours. News stations picked up the story, replaying the footage of Whitman's assault and arrest. Hashtags like "Justice for Evelyn" and "End Transit Racism" trended worldwide. Activists rallied around Evelyn, organizing protests outside the transit authority's headquarters. Meanwhile, Evelyn remained focused. She sat in her modest living room, fielding calls and texts. Offers of legal help poured in, but she chose Angela Martin, a civil rights attorney who reached out after seeing the video. Angela arrived at Evelyn's home with a stack of documents. "Whitman's history is troubling," she said, spreading out files. "Racial profiling, verbal abuse. This wasn't his first incident." Evelyn nodded. "It's not just him we need to hold accountable. It's the system that let him get away with it." Angela agreed. "We're going after Whitman for assault and the Transit Authority for fostering a culture of discrimination." The case gained momentum as Whitmans came forward. The teenage girl, the young man with the phone, and other passengers shared powerful testimonies. Their words painted a damning picture of Whitman's behavior and the authorities' negligence. On the day of the trial, protesters filled the courthouse steps. Reporters swarmed as Evelyn arrived, her head held high. Angela delivered a searing opening statement. "This case is about more than an assault on a city bus. It's about a system of unchecked abuse and discrimination." Whitman's lawyer attempted to deflect blame, claiming his client had been provoked. But the evidence was overwhelming. The viral video, witness accounts, and Whitman's arrest painted a clear picture of misconduct. Evelyn testified, her voice steady as she recounted the incident. "This wasn't just about me," she said. "It was about standing up to years of injustice." The jury deliberated for hours, but the outcome was decisive. Whitman was found guilty of assault and dismissed from his position. The Transit Authority announced sweeping policy changes, including mandatory bias training and a review of employee complaints. Evelyn's courage sparked a broader movement. Activists used her story to push for reforms in public transportation systems nationwide. Evelyn herself became a quiet but powerful advocate, speaking at community events and supporting others who faced discrimination. Months later, as Evelyn boarded a bus, passengers greeted her with warm smiles. A young girl approached her shyly. "Are you Mrs. Carter?" Evelyn smiled. "Yes, I am." "You're a hero," the girl said softly. Evelyn shook her head. "No, sweetheart. I'm just someone who refused to stay silent." As the bus rolled forward, Evelyn looked out the window at a city forever changed. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time it felt like progress was within reach. Evelyn Carter sat quietly at the plaintiff's table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as she listened to the opening statements. The trial had garnered significant attention, with the courtroom packed and reporters buzzing outside. Evelyn's attorney, Angela Martin, stood to address the jury, her presence commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Angela began, her voice steady, "this case is about accountability. Evelyn Carter, a paying passenger, was humiliated and physically assaulted because she dared to claim her rightful place. This trial isn't just about a single moment of injustice. It's about a pattern of discrimination and a system that allowed it to persist." Angela's words painted a vivid picture, detailing how Evelyn had boarded a bus, paid her fare, and taken an empty seat near the front. Robert Whitman, the bus driver, had demanded she move to the back, citing policy. Evelyn had refused, stating she had followed all rules. What followed was an altercation captured on video, a grainy yet damning piece of evidence showing Whitman physically removing Evelyn from her seat. When the defense presented its case, they focused on Whitman's claim that he was simply enforcing protocol. Whitman sat at the defense table, avoiding Evelyn's gaze. His attorney, smooth but dispassionate, sought to downplay the incident. "This was a misunderstanding," he argued. "Mr. Whitman was performing his duties in a high-pressure situation." But Angela was relentless. She played the video for the jury, the courtroom falling silent as the footage showed Evelyn calmly seated before Whitman approached, escalating the situation. Angela then questioned the jury. Is this the behavior of someone simply enforcing policy, or someone emboldened by bias? Angela's own testimony was the turning point. Taking the stand, she spoke with quiet dignity, recounting the humiliation she had felt that day. "I paid my fare like everyone else," she said, her voice steady. "I just wanted to sit down, but he decided I didn't belong there. Angela asked her, "Why didn't you move to the back of the bus when he told you to?" Evelyn paused, her eyes scanning the room. "Because it wasn't about the seat. It was about dignity. If I had moved, I would have been saying his actions were acceptable, and they weren't." The defense tried to challenge Evelyn's account, but she remained composed, countering each question with poise. By the time she stepped down, her testimony had clearly resonated with the jury. Next, Whitman was called to testify. He shifted nervously in his seat, his tone defensive as he insisted he had no choice but to act. "I was following protocol," he claimed. Angela's cross-examination, however, dismantled his same. Angela asked, holding up a file. "Then explain these complaints." She outlined 5 formal complaints filed against Whitman over the years, each citing discriminatory behavior. "Were these passengers lying?" she pressed. Whitman fumbled, his responses growing more defensive. Angela's calm yet incisive questioning revealed a pattern of behavior that couldn't be dismissed as coincidence or exaggeration. "Isn't it true," she said, her voice sharp, "that the only protocol you were enforcing was your own prejudice?" The defense's objections were frequent but ineffective. The jury watched Whitman closely, their expression skeptical as Angela's pointed questions left him visibly rattled. The Transit Authority's representative was next on the stand, attempting to deflect blame, but Angela's cross-examination exposed systemic failures. "You were aware of these complaints," she stated, her tone firm. "What actions did you take?" "We followed policy," the representative stammered. "And yet," Angela countered. Mr. Whitman continued driving, unchecked, until this incident was caught on camera. "Is that what you call accountability?" "Sir, Mitrov Maverick." By the time closing arguments began, Angela had built a compelling case. Addressing the jury, she said, "Evelyn Carter could have stayed silent. She could have allowed this injustice to go unchallenged. Instead, she chose to stand up, not just for herself, but for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. Today, you have the power to send a message that no one is above accountability and no one should have to endure discrimination." The defense's closing argument, by contrast, lacked conviction. They urged the jury to consider Whitman's mistake in a high-pressure situation, but failed to address the broader issues Angela had so effectively highlighted. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. The foreperson's voice rang out, "We find the defendant, Robert Whitman, guilty of assault and misconduct. We also find the Transit Authority liable for negligence." The courtroom erupted in a wave of emotion. Evelyn closed her eyes, relief washing over her. Outside, supporters cheered as news of the verdict spread. Reporters surrounded Evelyn, who spoke briefly but powerfully. "This isn't just my victory," she said. "It's ours. It's proof that standing up for what's right can make a difference." In the weeks that followed, the Transit Authority announced reforms, including mandatory anti-BS training and independent oversight. Whitman was sentenced to community service and anger management classes, effectively ending his career as a bus driver. Evelyn returned to her quiet life but became a prominent figure in her community, speaking at schools and forums about justice and equality. Her story became a symbol of resilience and the power of standing up for one's rights. One evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sunset, her phone buzzed with a message from Angela. "We did it. Thank you for trusting me." Evelyn smiled, her heart full. The fight had been long and arduous, but justice had prevailed. The world she knew was a little better for it.